Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I feel like a broken record already here in the first month of a new year because I keep talking about how the future is here. Oftentimes we want to talk about all these futuristic AI solutions or futuristic tech or futuristic team structures and ways to grow our business, but the truth is it's already been here. And today we have got an incredible guest and fellow entrepreneur that is really at the forefront of what it looks like to build successful, resilient teams that not only work together, but stay together and really unlock incredible growth inside of your business. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Phillip Wyness. Phillip helps product-focused founders of both US and EU remote startups and scale-ups build high-performing, resilient teams through targeted audits, where he looks at things like communication, rituals, and wellness, and custom performance playbooks, which enables profitable scaling with better retention and team strength. And what I really appreciate about Phillip's not just entrepreneurial story, but his life story as well, is that this is somebody who has been in the game for quite some time. He's been remote working for more than 6 years. He has a marketing and sales background himself. He's been living in Prague. What a lucky city to be able to live in. I'm excited to hear that part of Phillip's story for more than 11 years. And he's a fellow New Englander. He's from Connecticut originally. So we're all going to learn a lot from him today. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Phillip Wyness. All right, Phillip, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for having me here.
Heck yes. I'm so excited to dive into all the good things, not just what you do for work, but how you got to that point of doing it. So let's put the spotlight on you first. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Phillip? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, so originally sort of got the idea to start what I'm doing when I first started freelancing. So that was back in 2019. And I was remote working then before it became basically mainstream, or more into the mainstream, I would say. And I would say Gary Vee was a pretty big inspiration of mine to freelance and to eventually get onto this entrepreneur path. So I read a few of his books at the time and just compounded from there. And then I got my first client. I was doing marketing work. Originally, social media marketing was sort of the thing to do at that time, around like 2019, 18. And then after that, I was continuing to do marketing work. And then a few years ago, I started to do business development and sales. And throughout all that time, it was all remote work, all startups. And through that time, I realized that I should be able to start my own thing. And I saw a lot of the issues that remote teams have. And I was definitely inspired to take some action and thought, okay, hey, I can definitely make this into a business. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, I really appreciate that overview, especially knowing obviously so much of your background comes from the fact that you do personally, you live in the EU, you live in Prague, which is obviously one of the most beautiful cities on planet Earth. So I love the fact that you've taken that life trajectory as well to say, no, I'm gonna create what this all looks like. And of course, having your own business or businesses is the perfect way to complement that sort of lifestyle. So Phillip, you obviously have such interesting career background. Obviously, you've seen so many different sides of the SaaS world, of the business world, of remote teams. Introduce us to what it looked like when you sat down and you said, no, this is the business that I want to start. Map out what's Remote Flo look like? What's Remote Work Pro look like? I'm so excited for listeners to be introduced to that work.
Yeah, so with Remote Flo, so basically it started with all I learned through my career working with remote teams, and then figuring out, okay, what needs to be done to to improve, let's say, the team structure and everything. And I was in positions not really to make any decisions, let's say, with how the teams were going to be structured and managed, right? So I knew I had the knowledge rather recently to, okay, let's see how we can fix that for other remote teams, so they don't have to go through what I went through. So it just culminated into everything to be, what can I do to make these teams more efficient and happier, increase the retention, and make sure leadership is doing what they can to, let's say, keep the team happy, grow, and scale, which ultimately leads to better workflow. So that's basically the core idea that I promote with my business. So I take a look at the teams. I speak usually with the founder, CEO, or head of HR if they have one. And then we just go through certain steps. I figure out what they're doing with their team, if they're doing any sort of team building, like how much do they check in with their team? Are they micromanaging, right? So this is sort of the base layer. And then I get into discussing how to keep individuals happy in terms of incorporating some wellness habits. So, for example, I personally struggled with a lot of setting boundaries for myself, like when to work, when not to work. And so when you're in an office, it's pretty straightforward when you're going to an office, right? It's you have let's say 9 to 5, right? So you're in at 9, you can leave at 5. And for most people, let's say they leave the work at their desk at 5, right? And I struggled with it, and I know a lot of people are struggling with it, that there's sort of no boundaries with the work when you're working remotely, as an entrepreneur. And I thought, okay, how can we make people, happier, healthier, right? And so I discussed, okay, like, for example, setting up, let's say, Pomodoro techniques, where, okay, you're focused on doing work for a block time, right? So let's say 20, 30 minutes, and then you take a break for 5 minutes, right? And you just take it from there, right? And during the day, and making sure that they need to get up, not sit at the desk like for hours straight. It's just, you need to move the body, move around, and making sure that the employees, they can close, let's say, their computer. They set like a time that's ideal for them. So let's say, I don't know, it can be 6 o'clock or 5:30, whichever they feel is more relevant to the work, for example. And making sure they can step back and just, okay, quit. Let's not think about work anymore, because I was really violating a lot of those boundaries for myself. And I was, let's say, I have all this freedom since I work remote, and I'm, working my own business, and as long as results get done. And, I would start, let's say, work at 10, and then maybe I was in a good mood. I wanted to work more and more. And, sometimes I would take the computer to bed and just like work until maybe 9. And then I realized this can't continue, and I was burning out and wasn't really taking vacation. And so, yeah, it's just a lot of those struggles that I think a lot of remote workers deal with. And I eventually, through setting some habits, for myself, I was able to, let's say, put my health at the forefront and make sure that I was quitting at a certain time, working at a certain time, and setting those limits for myself to be productive, and then also, happy, and would say not burnt out.
Phillip, I'm going to call this out about the way that you talk about remote teams, because I feel like this is your very unique advantage in the marketplace. And obviously, you've personally been a remote employee for quite some time. And so the fact that you get to bring that into your business is very powerful. But here's what I hear is that when I have the conversation with entrepreneurs, which obviously I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs every single week, a lot of them are worried about the technology of what remote work looks like, of how am I going to manage them? What are their hours going to look like? How do we navigate time zones? What technology do we have? Is it Slack? Is it Google Meet? They worry about all of these things, but the way that you talk about remote teams, Phillip, what I'm hearing is that you're emphasizing the teams part of remote teams, is that we have to build, yes, it is remote by nature, but we still need to have team building. We still need to have interpersonal relationships. We still need to have good management practices. Talk to us about that shift, because I feel like, when Upwork became big, we all became familiar with freelancers, and a lot of people started turning to freelancers, but never embedded them in their teams. Now is such a great shift in the global marketplace, because we're truly building those remote teams. Again, emphasis on teams. So from your perspective, what are those questions beyond technology? What are those areas that we should be focusing on to create a team that just so happens to be remote?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people are so, let's say, team leaders, management, right? Let's say the founders. A lot of them, especially if they don't have HR in their team, a lot of them, are coming from a strict product background, which is obviously great. You need a product, you need to have something, right, to sell and to have your business. But a lot of them are missing the knowledge with how to manage the team properly. And they focus a lot about, let's say, efficiency, like getting things done, but more on their tech stack, right? So they're focused on the tech stack. They're focused just on maximizing results, but also maximizing results also includes keeping the team well and happy, right? You definitely don't want to lose, some of your best employees or management in your team because you're just forgetting that it's necessary to incorporate some HR practices and to make sure everybody's happy. So what I push in my business is, okay, let's look at, let's say, the HR perspective, right? So what's keeping people well, what's going to help with retention in the company, right? So I incorporate all these things and basically show them like, hey, you need to look at this if you want to keep your employees. You don't want to deal with high turnover, and then you've got to, train new people, and you're just going to, keep into the cycle of just getting new employees, and a lot of them are not aware that, okay, it's great to be remote, but you do need some sort of communication and some rituals for your team. At least try to meet a few times a year, depending on the distance between people. But, try to meet as regularly as you can. If you can meet, like I said, it depends on the distance, but if you can meet at least once a couple weeks, or, just checking in on people, making sure they're happy, like an online call, like making sure they're all right. Like, how can I help? Do you, can I help you with something in regards to maybe offering some employee benefits within the team? And just, consider your offer for your employees, and just consider it all, because hiring new people and training them is just a hassle, and you lose momentum, and you're just in this endless loop.
Yeah, Phillip, I'm going to totally put you on the spot here, because one of my favorite facts about you is that you've been to 58 countries so far, which is a crazy number. Most people have certainly not been to half of that number of countries. So shout out to you. But I would imagine along the way, you have been exposed to so many different cultures, a wide variety of cultures. You and I, obviously, especially growing up in New England, we're very exposed to Western culture, but you've seen so many different types of cultures. How does culture factor into remote teams? Because as someone, I've had a remote team since 2009, and I've had a fair few bit of amazing Philippines-based workers, and I know that Philippine work culture is a little bit different. They have things like the 13th month, for example, when it comes to bonus pay. So, Philip, that's just a little bit of a loaded answer, or a loaded question, but I'm excited to hear your perspective on how do we, as founders, as leaders, make sense of all of these cultural differences? Because I would imagine it's a bit of homework, a bit of patience, a bit of curiosity. So how can we navigate all that?
Right. It definitely depends who you have on your team, right? So there's so many different cultures and backgrounds to consider, right? Through my experience, let's say the Western way, I would say the Western way of, team management, especially more so in Central Europe, really omits, I would say, the focus on team retention, right? So the team wellness, what's going to keep the team happy ultimately, right? And I feel that a lot of the Latin American cultures that I've been exposed to, they focus more on being more, let's say, friendly, more hospitable, most of the time. But it also depends on the company, right? But let's say in general, and then in Europe, there's a pretty strong focus with incorporating the team, right? The benefits, like Europe is known to have a lot of employee benefits, something that the U.S. is, I believe, still catching up on. But there's still definitely a lot of room for improvement, I would say, globally in this, especially, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the founders, CEOs, when they're starting up or scaling, they still omit a lot of the HR practices that are needed to keep a team happy and well and productive.
Yeah, hearing you talk about HR practices, I've got to call myself out here, is that as an entrepreneur since the age of 19, I've had very few jobs, 9-to-5 jobs. I've had internships and stuff, especially while I was a college kid. But Philip, I think this is hard to get right in the corporate, in the 9-to-5 world, let alone in the remote world, is team building exercises. And I love how much you talk about rituals, and I want to go deeper there, because I found that the only ever team building exercise I went to at a summer internship that I had was they took us on a boat, to one of those islands off the coast of Boston, and we played beach volleyball for the day. Well, 90% of people there didn't play beach volleyball, and we were all just kind of sitting there being like, we'd rather be working, or we'd rather just have time off. Like, we'd rather be doing something else. And so I know how hard it is to plan something that everybody's actually going to enjoy and not have it feel like, oh, we just have to do this. So obviously team building, rituals, there's all different ways to do it. What does that look like in the remote team world? Because I would imagine it's even more difficult.
Yeah, right. It really depends on, let's say, where your remote team is, right? So if you have a more local team, it's obviously more easy to have these team building events to meet up quite regularly, right? But let's say if you're dealing with a team that's really spread out, so really far away from each other, right? So one of the best things you can do is just, depending on your budget, right, is to try to meet up at least a couple times a year or a year. If that's not possible to meet, depending on budget issues, the next best thing is just to check up regularly, agree with the teammate, your employee, Hey, let's just meet up, have like a chat, see how you're doing. Just a simple checkup. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to talk about work. It could just be just simple conversation to see how they're doing in life, and just showing up as a leader, making sure they're happy and doing what you can do to make sure that they're enjoying their time and productive within your team.
Yeah, really well said. It gets my mind going in so many different directions. I want to shout out one of my fellow entrepreneurial friends. Something he does with his remote team is every country has their own local food delivery service. And so for his team member in Spain, he uses, the Grubhub of Spain or whatever that equivalent is. And he'll do virtual lunch with his team members. And he will send to them a delivery of food at wherever it is that they are. And then they all just hang out together over lunch, which is a
virtual.
Yeah.
A virtual lunch together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And so it makes me question, to me, obviously as a lifelong entrepreneur, which can be a lonely journey at times, but to me, what I miss is that proverbial water cooler. Like I always hear about, and I watch The Office or Office Space, and they're always talking about, oh, Phillip, meet me at the water cooler. And that's where you just kind of hang out. I glossed over tech a little bit earlier, but I do want to go there with you because you have so much experience in that domain as a remote work professional yourself, and obviously as the founder of Remote Flo. What, in your perspective, are those key ingredients of a team's tech stack? I am massively biased towards Slack. I love Slack. It's one of my favorite pieces of technology. But I'm super curious from your perspective because I feel like you take it from both angles as a business leader and founder, but also you've been there as a remote worker. So what are some of those favorite tech tools that we can use to unlock our teams?
Right. Definitely agree with Slack. That's definitely a great one to use. Making sure you're having a solid a video chat option, right? That's really one of the core foundations, right? There's a lot of different tools within that space. The popular ones, Zoom, Google Meet, which are great in their own regard. And then having the ability to do, let's say, webinars, depending on your business, of course. But there's Zoom is a really great one to have webinars. Also, something that gets overlooked, I think, quite a lot, and I feel is becoming more of a popular topic, which is good for companies, is cybersecurity. And I would definitely recommend, let's say, if you want, there's many different tools out there, but something simple that you can do is have a VPN, and then also be educated on some cybersecurity, at least on a base level as a remote worker, right? Because a lot of remote workers, are taking their device, they're taking their computer all over the place, right? So airports, cafes, libraries, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to make sure your computer is secure, whichever way that is. Make sure you don't lose it. Make sure it's totally on you, right? And then when you're out connecting to all these strange Wi-Fi connections, make sure you're using a VPN, at least at the minimum, to protect yourself from any sort of threats that could come from let's say a fake Wi-Fi address. You could connect to a fake one, and then they can go right into your device. And it's quite a concerning issue, because it's becoming easier to be a hacker. There's a lot of tools and things that you can use nowadays, especially, but also there's a lot of tools that you can use to protect yourself. So at least have that core foundation for yourself. And then if you're a team leader, manager, founder, make sure you're incorporating at least some basic cybersecurity practices.
Yeah, Philip, you laughed as you talked about some sketchy Wi-Fi that we all connect to. I would imagine for you, through your travels, you've had some personal experience there. I'll never forget when I landed. It was the first year that I had an iPhone. I went to Costa Rica and I was just using like the built-in Apple Mail app. Sure enough, connected to the airport's Wi-Fi right upon landing, and everybody in my contact book was starting to get emails from me. That was certainly not me.
Oh, no.
So, learned that lesson the hard way about having VPNs, especially on public networks that don't even have passwords. So definitely really valuable insights there. I want to squeeze in a couple more questions with you because it's so cool to hear your perspective on all these things. I want to ask you about feedback loops because I feel like so frequently in the way that you share with us your thoughts on remote teams, you keep coming back to happiness, and hearing you talk about happiness of the team makes me think, well, gosh, I hope everybody on my team is very happy. And I want to take happiness more seriously. I want to have that as a metric because you put so much emphasis on it. So my question to you, and I know it's probably, there's a lot of different ways you could approach it, but how do we measure and monitor happiness in our teams? How do we create those feedback loops to stay on top of their happiness and wellness?
Right. That's a great question, actually. Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few things you can do. It really depends on quite a few factors. I would say how large is your team, right? Whether your team is all spread out or everybody's sort of living, let's say, in the same city, same area. So depends how easy it is to meet up, right, on that aspect. If I would say physical meetups, doing something, setting a routine with physical meetups, doing some team building events, making sure everybody's available to participate with it. So that's something you can do, let's say on a physical level, if you have that luxury within your remote team. So if you can meet physically, then the options are quite unlimited with what you can do, right? But if the team is spread out, there's things become a little bit more restricted, right? So you have to focus mainly on online meetups, right? Like you mentioned, just having that team lunch online, is something. It's so simple, but it's so effective. I know some employees might argue against it, like, oh, I can't be bothered to do it, this and that. But I think if you can maybe also speak to your employees, speak to your team about what they find could be interesting, could be fun for them to do, let's say monthly, quarterly, right? Yearly. So take your employees' feedback, what would help them out, and sort of, as a leader, decide what to do from there, right? So if people are spread out and you have the budget, at least focus on meeting up, once, twice a year. If you can't do that, like I said, look into the online meetups, having a simple lunch online can definitely do wonders, or even, let's say, giving a simple gift of appreciation, like, let's say, birthday gift, or, something small. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but just the main thing is just to be mindful of your employees and to really consider them, and because you don't want to lose them or make them unhappy, right? So if they're unhappy, chances are they're going to be less productive. They may eventually leave, right? So it's all these small investments. Doesn't have to be much, but it can keep all your employees happy, and you're just going to be having a great team.
Yeah, so well said. Phillip, as someone who interviews a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm going to say this again. I already said it earlier on, but something that I so appreciate about your approach is I feel like people who are tuning into this episode, obviously they see the episode title. So frequently when we talk about remote work and remote teams, it is that strong emphasis on remote, but so frequently your answers take the remote out of it and say, no, let's focus on that team. And even that emphasis, I don't think this is talked about and recommended enough in the marketplace, is get together in person. There's that phrase in the world of production of like breaking that, I don't know if it's the third wall or the fourth wall, I always forget what it is, but breaking that fourth wall and saying, just because we're a remote team doesn't mean we don't get to know each other in person. Like, Phillip, I think it's going to be cool one day somewhere in the world when you and I get to sit down in person over a coffee and just share stories, founder to founder. I think that's the cool stuff that brings people together. So I love your approach. I'm so grateful for all these things, but I'm going to put you on the spot one last time because I asked this question at the end of every episode, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
Oh, wow. If there's one thing I would say is definitely can consider yourself, because you're your best asset, right? So if you're not happy and healthy, you're not going to be productive. You're not going to be achieving the goals and the business that you want to build ultimately. So it's definitely important to make sure you prioritize yourself and to take it from there.
Yes, I love that advice for our listeners, because Phillip, as someone who's been in the game for 17 years, it's advice we can't take for granted. And I love and really appreciate the fact that you are someone who, you're on the go. You obviously travel the world in so many cool ways, and you live a really awesome lifestyle that complements your business and what it means to be a founder. So you're juggling so many different things all at the same time, as we all are in our own lives. And that constant reminder, looking inward, it's such an important thing. So I'm really excited for people to check out all the amazing work that you're doing. I feel like we only touched the tip of the iceberg of so many cool projects that you're involved with. So drop those links on us for listeners who want to find all the cool stuff that you're up to. Where should they go from here?
Oh, wow. Yeah, from here, you can definitely find out more on my website. You can check me out on LinkedIn, where I'm posting relevant tips and content. And I'm also in the process of launching a blog, so focusing on basically what I've just discussed. So the wellness, the team rituals, how to keep your team happy, right, in the long term. So focusing on that long-term game, making sure your team is there in the long run for you. So keeping them happy, well, and just taking it from there.
Yes, I love that. And listeners, you already know the drill. We are dropping all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. We're linking directly to the Remote Flo website, which is Remote Flo, F-L-O, remoteflo.com. But you don't have to remember that if you're on the go. Click right on through from the show notes. You will see that Phillip is not shy. You can easily get a hold of him. He has book a free discovery call right there in the header, because how many times did we hear in today's conversation how much he loves that human-to-human interaction? So definitely check out that link down below in the show notes. We're also linking to his personal LinkedIn, which is actually how we came across Phillip's work, and we were so excited to invite him here on the show to share so much of this with all of us here today. So don't be shy in reaching out to him. Otherwise, Phillip, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide in over 150 countries, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian. It was a real pleasure to speak.